Hello my dear students, welcome back to the class. So today I am going to teach you chapter number 3 from history, which comes under the growth of nationalism, and the name of the chapter is Age of Revolution. So today we are going to discuss about Age of Revolution. In this chapter we will be discussing two topics, that is American War of Independence and the French Revolution. So today we will do only the first one, American War of Independence, and in the next class we will do the French Revolution. So many of you have not heard about the American War of Independence. It is very, very important for us to understand. When America was discovered, or we can say that Christopher Columbus discovered a new land, many of the people went and settled in a new land, and altogether 13 colonies were set up. So it's a small map given over here, you can see over here, right? If you see this map over here, you can understand 13 colonies. The yellowish part, the yellow part is all about the 13 colonies, where you can see New Hampshire is there, okay, New York is there. So in this, the yellow part, the yellow shaded part is the 13 colonies, okay, which is there in your book also, you can go through it. Okay, so now American War of Independence. Why there was a war for independence? America was discovered, North America actually was discovered by Christopher Columbus, and later on many of the people from Britain and France who had been facing religious persecution, they went and settled there, okay, in the form of 13 colonies. 13 colonies were set up. Okay, so now what happened, that the people of America, American colonies, they wanted to gain independence, and they want independence from whom? From whom they want to free themselves. Okay, so that we are going to discuss over here one by one. So over here 5 topics are mentioned. These are the causes. These are the causes of American War of Independence: rigid control over economic policy, unjust and exploitative administration, heavy taxation, social and cultural differences, and no representation in the British Parliament. So now I think you understood it. British Parliament. I think by this only you understood it, that the people of the 13 colonies were controlled economically and politically by the British government. Okay, so the American War of Independence. Okay, now when American War of Independence was first organized, okay, political revolution in the history of the world. So this is why it is important, because this American War of Independence was the first organized political revolution in the history of the world, which inspired many other countries later on, and India was one among them to be inspired by the American War of Independence. When India was under British rule, they were inspired by the American War of Independence. If the Americans, if the people of 13 colonies can free themselves from the British rule, then why not we? So world was inspired by American War of Independence as well as the French Revolution. Okay, so due to this, my dear, there was a birth. When the American War of Independence was fought, it led to the birth of United States of America as a nation. 13 colonies were there, and after the end of the American War of Independence, a new country was born in the name of United States of America. Okay, and it also ended the autocratic rule. And then there was establishment of democratic form of government. Okay, democratic form of government. So now let us now discuss one by one what were the causes which were responsible for the 13 colonies to start a revolution to free themselves from the British rule, one by one. Okay, so altogether 13 colonies were there. Okay, so let me tell you, my dear, as you know that the American continent was discovered, okay, and many of the people from many of the European peoples went and settled over there in the 16th century. By the middle of 18th century, 13 British colonies had been established along the east coast of North America. Eastern coast of North America, 13 colonies were set up. Okay. Now, as the people had gone from Britain, okay, so the British government thought that we have the authority to rule over them. Their government will be controlled by us. Okay, so that they had they assume that we can do whatever we want with our own people. But on the other side, the people of American colonies, they were not ready to be under British rule because of number of reasons. First of all, number one is rigid control over economic policies. Rigid control over economic policies. Now let me tell you, these colonies were under the direct control of British government, which gave them considerable liberty to manage the local affairs, but kept a tight control on the economic policies. Liberty was given to them, but in the field of economy, my dear, economic policy was completely tightened by the British government. Okay, the government of England, they believed that the colonies existed for the benefit of the mother country. Britain was the mother country because the people had gone from that country to this colony. So they had a belief. They believed that the British government or the government of England had every authority, to look after the interest of the mother country. Okay, and this was resented by the people of 13 colonies, my dear, who were independent-minded Britishers. They were independent-minded Britishers. They don't want to be controlled by a British Parliament because they have left their homes. They have left their homes and they have come and settled in a new land. So they don't want to be controlled by the British government. They were independent-minded peoples. Okay, that is why, my dear, England, that is why we can say that these people, they wanted to free themselves from the dominion of the British government. Because these people who were settled in a new world, okay, they were in search of freedom and a better life. If they had been living peacefully in their own country, then there was no need to move from their land to a new land. Why should they do? So they were not happy there. They were religiously persecuted. In the name of religion, persecution went on. That is why the people from Britain, okay, they left their homes and they went and settled in a new land, okay, in search of freedom and in search of better life. So in such a situation, if the British government tries to dominate these people of 13 colonies, then definitely they are not going to accept it. Okay, children. So next one is unjust and exploitative administration. Now let me make it more clear, my dear. Administration. 13 colonies were there. How many colonies were there? 13 colonies were there. Each colony had its own assembly. That means 13 assemblies were there. Okay. That means each colony had its own assembly elected by the people of the colony. People of the 13 colonies elected an assembly, like we elect the member of Lok Sabha, no? The same way, the people of 13 colonies elected the assembly. So altogether 13 assemblies were there. But the governor of the colony was appointed. The governor of the colony was appointed by the British government. Why so? Why they are interfering over here? The people of the 13 colonies, they elected their own assembly, but here you can see that the governor was appointed by the British government. Now what were the powers of the government? British governor. The governor was not answerable to the assembly. Though was appointed by the British government and was the governor of the colony, but was not answerable to the colony. He governed the colony in the interest of Great Britain. He governed the colony in the interest of Great Britain. That is the mother country. So this caused great resentment among the American settlers who worked very hard but could not enjoy the fruits of their labor. They worked very hard but they could not enjoy the fruits of their labor, my dear. Did you understand? So this is all about administration. Once again, 13 colonies, they had their own assembly, but the governor was appointed by the British government. So why British government, new country, new land, there should not be any interference, but they felt that they are our people, so we have the right to govern over them. But the people who had left their homes and went and settled there, they were independent minded, they were free minded people, they wanted freedom. And when this type of encroachment was seen in their political life, then they became very much frustrated. They wanted to free themselves from the British rule. So that is all about unjust and exploitative administration. Suppose, for example, I am the Prime Minister of this country, or I am the Governor of this state, or whoever in a good post. So I am responsible, I am accountable to the people, I must listen to the people. But the governor who was appointed by the British government was not answerable to the people of 13 colonies. He worked in the interest of the British government. So definitely people will not accept it. People will not at all accept it. And same thing happened also. Okay. Next one you can see here, heavy taxation. What is taxation? Heavy taxation. That means, my dear, British government collected heavy taxes from them and imposed many restrictions on their business and commerce. Taxes was imposed upon them and restriction also was imposed upon them. What type of restriction, my dear? They were not allowed to sell goods to other countries. They could not have any trading relations with the other countries. They only have to trade with Britain and they have to sell their goods only to Britain, that also at a cheaper price. That also at a very cheaper price. And this restriction hampered the economic development of these colonies. Tea, jute, many of the products which were grown, which were cultivated in America, okay, they could have sold to other countries, they could have made trading relations to other countries, but that was not allowed. British government directly restricted that this colonial product will not be sold to other countries, that only will be sold to Britain. And that also at a cheaper price. So like India, my dear, India was one of the source of raw materials. Even America also was the source of raw materials for the British Empire. So this is what, my dear, British government did. Okay, and due to this restriction, my dear, it hampered the economic growth of the people of the 13 colonies. That is why they were very much frustrated. They were not at all happy with the existing system. They wanted freedom. They wanted to free themselves from the British dominion and rule. Okay. The next one is social and cultural differences. Social and cultural differences. You know that, my dear, when these people went and settled in these 13 colonies, my dear, their main, they wanted to set up a separate identity as the people of 13 colonies. We are now no more British, we are no more British people. So, socially and culturally, my dear, American colonies were different from the British. Socially and culturally, they were different from the British. The colonists were very, very simple and liberal. Unlike British Puritans, who were rigid and conservative. The British Puritans, people of Britain, were very, very rigid and conservative. Because of the rigidity, because of the conservativeness, my dear, these people could not tolerate this rigidity. That is why they left their homes and went and settled in this new found land, my dear. So they were very simple living people. So over the years, living there for years and years, my dear, colonies had developed a distinct identity of their own. The American identity that aspired for freedom to grow and develop as a separate independent nation. So they have separated themselves and set up a separate identity. We are Americans and we need to free ourselves. We need freedom, and the aspiration for freedom went on growing in the minds of the people. And they wanted separate independent nation, free from the British control. So that is all about socially and culturally. They developed a separate identity as an American, not as a Britishers. Did you understand? Okay. Now next one you can see here, no representation in the British Parliament. No representation in the British Parliament. Very, very simple, my dear. The governor was appointed by them. In the British Parliament, there was no one to represent the 13 colonies. No one to represent 13 colonies. And on what basis? On what basis they are controlling the economic and political condition of this country or these 13 colonies? Why should I obey the British law when our representation is not there in the British Parliament? That is why, my dear, that is why no representation in the British Parliament. That means, as a mother country, Britain was a mother country, British expected obedience, or we can say that Britain expected obedience from the people of 13 colonies. The matters came to a head when the colonies demanded the rights to have a say in matters affecting them. So they thought that if you think that you are our mother country and your government is going to look after administration, then definitely our right also should be protected. We also must be allowed to have a say in the government. The colonies argued that the British Parliament had no right to tax the colonies. They don't have the right to tax our colonies. Why? Since they don't have any representation in the Parliament. We don't have any representation in the British Parliament. Why they are imposing taxes on us, my dear? Why should I pay taxes? Why should we pay taxes? Because that tax is benefiting them, not our colonies. So simple. There was a slogan everywhere, protest everywhere, and they started coming out with a slogan, my dear, that no taxation without representation. No taxation without representation. Our representation is not there in the British Parliament. We are not going to pay taxes. So that was the first time the people raised their voice, my dear. And this taxation without representation became a clarion call. It was a clear message from the colonies to the British Parliament. Now it was ready that these people now they are not going to obey the orders of the British Parliament or the British government. Did you understand, my dear? So no representation means no taxation. We are not going to pay the taxes. If our government is not working for us, why should we pay the taxes? We pay taxes for the development of the country. We pay taxes for the betterment of our country. So if the government is not working for the development and betterment of the country, then we are not going to pay the tax. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. We pay tax for our country, not to the people who are in the government. So the people of 13 colonies, they believe that they don't have the right to impose taxes on the colonies, because our representation is not there in the British Parliament. Hope you all are understanding it, my dear children. Now next one you can see here. Okay, number 5 is over. Now number 6, influence of European philosophers. Influence of European philosophers. Okay. Number 6, influence of European philosophers. That was a time, my dear, many of the European philosophers played a very, very important role in making the people conscious regarding their life, regarding their rights and all. So, American revolutionaries were greatly influenced by the ideals of European philosophers like Locke, Voltaire and Rousseau, who inspired them to fight for liberty. They discussed about liberty, what actually is liberty, freedom. Liberty means freedom. So they had inspired, they had played a very, very important role in influencing the minds of the people of the colonies to free themselves for liberty. Okay, the next one we have is demand for total freedom. Now the people of the 13 colonies, now they started demanding for total freedom because they felt that there is no representation in the British Parliament. That is why they want complete freedom, total freedom from the British rule. So the colonies began to assert their rights to sovereign authority and argued that the rights to govern should be based on the consent of the governed. Right to govern. That means it is mentioned right to sovereign authority. Okay, must be based on the consent of the governed. I am the one governed by you, so you must ask me whether I want to be under you or not, whether the people want to be ruled by the British Parliament or not. So very simple. If they could have made a very, very simple administration by not overlooking the demands and proper representation, if they could have given to the colonies people, then definitely they could not have revolted, my dear. They could have lived like a mother and son. But here the oppressiveness was continuing in a different way. So the unjust and oppressive and exploitative British government had forfeited its right to govern the American colonists and must therefore be overthrown. That means they now became very much ready that at any cost now we must throw the British rule, or we must free ourselves from the British rule. We must free ourselves from the British rule, my dear. Okay, we must free ourselves from the British rule. Okay, children. So for the now, the spark of the American War of Independence, my dear. The spark of the American, that's like immediate cause we call it, no? Revolt of 1857, introduction of British cartridge was the immediate cause of the revolt. Okay, in the First World War, Sarajevo crisis had become the cause of immediate cause of the First World War. In the same way, the spark of the Great War of Independence, American War of Independence, was started. Okay, through a Boston incident. So what was that? It was mentioned, my dear, the revolt known as American War of Independence was sparked off by a incident known as Boston Tea Party. In 1773, my dear, a group of colonists disguised themselves. Disguise means changing their base badal ke, okay? Disguised themselves as Red Indians and boarded the ship which was harbored at the Boston harbor. Okay, and threw 340 crates of tea into the sea. A ship was harbored over there, anchored over there, okay, in the harbor, and the people of the 13 colonies disguised, some of the people 13 colonies disguised themselves as Red Indians or the American colonists. They entered into the ship, threw the crates of boxes of tea into the sea, my dear. This incident was the protest against the new taxes on tea. Taxes on tea. Overall taxes, this was a new tax they have imposed over tea, my dear. So the Boston Tea Party was seen as an act of an open defiance of the colonists against the British authorities. The Boston Tea Party was the open defiance against the British authority, my dear. Against the British authority, my dear. So this is how, my dear, Boston Tea Party, Boston Harbor, a ship was anchored over there. And the people entered into the ship, disguised themselves, and threw the crates of boxes of tea into the sea, my dear. It took place in 1773, which is known as Boston Tea Party, my dear. Okay, my dear children. So let's start with the topic, the American War of Independence. So now we'll discuss about the beginning of the war, and then and how the United States came into existence, the birth of the United States of America, and then the result of the American War of Independence. Okay, so Boston Tea Party, as I've already taught you, the Boston Tea Party, that means American War of Independence was fueled up by the Boston Tea Party. It was like in 1773, the group of people, they boarded the ship which was loaded with tea boxes, and they threw the boxes into the sea. Okay, and with that the movement started, and the American War of Independence started. So beginning of the war, like all the 13 colonies, okay, in 1774 they met at Philadelphia. Met in Philadelphia to discuss about the burning issues like unnecessary dominance of the British government in their internal matters of the colonies. So in 1774, the representatives of all the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia. Okay, and there they requested the British ruler, the King George III, to withdraw all the unjust and oppressive acts. All the unjust and oppressive acts, they wanted it to be removed by the British ruler, that is the King George III of England. Now when this request was placed in front of the king, my dear, the king took it in a different way. The king regarded this act as a rebellion. That means these people are going against the British government. That is why they declared war on the 13 colonies to suppress them. To suppress them, they declared war. Actually, the war was not started by the colonists. In order to suppress the demands of the American colonists, 13 colonies, Britain declared war on American colonies. Okay. Now what to do in order to survive, in order to save their life, they definitely need to protect themselves. So the Americans, that is the colonists, they raised their own army. Okay, and then fighting broke out in Lexington, Concord in April 1775. So the colonists were now very much adamant and clear that now this is the right time to free ourselves from the British rule. So under the leadership of George Washington, my dear, okay, he was given the charge of a command. He was the commander-in-chief of their troops, and he led the army to fight against the British army. Okay, the American army, that means 13 colonies, they raised their army, and that army was under the command of George Washington. Okay, and then in 1776, when the war was still going on, and finally again, now what is the purpose of our war? What we want to achieve after the end of the war? What will be the result? What actually we demand from the British rule, or what actually we want to set up? Okay, so in 1776, the representatives met again. The 13 colonies representatives met again in Philadelphia, and there they signed a declaration of independence. Okay, they signed a declaration of independence. All together, unanimously, they signed the declaration of independence. What will be the future of the American colonists? What will be the future of American colonists? So, and this American Declaration of Independence, my dear, it clearly stated that American colonies had the right to free themselves from the oppressive and exploitative rule of the British government. Definitely, they have the right to free themselves from the exploitative as well as oppressive rule of the British rule. So that they declared in the American War of Independence. Okay, and they have the right to free themselves from the British government, and they even have the right to form their own government. So that was declared in the American War of Independence, in which American representatives from 13 colonies, they signed it unanimously. Okay, then Declaration of Independence definitely contains some revolutionary ideas, and even it proclaimed that all men are born equal, okay, and are endowed with certain fundamental rights such as right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Right to life, liberty, and they definitely deserve happiness in their life. So that was the that was contained in the American the Declaration of Independence. Okay, Declaration of Independence. Got it? Now, finally, in the year 1781, the war continued, my dear, and in 1781, my dear, war finally came to an end, in which the colonists became successful. Okay, colonists became successful. The British forces were very badly defeated, and then the treaty was signed. The Treaty of Paris was signed between the British government and the colonists. British government and the colonists, they signed a treaty in 1783, which was known as the Treaty of Paris. Treaty of Paris. Okay, and through this treaty, my dear, the British government recognized the independence of the 13 colonies, which came to be known as United States of America. 13 colonies were given independence, and then there was a birth of United States of America. Okay, USA, United States of America. Okay, so as you know that where America stands today, my dear, in about 200 years, my dear, the United States of America transformed itself into the most powerful country in the world. It is the unchallenged superpower in the world today, my dear. Okay, it is the unchallenged power in the world today. You know, everywhere, number one, America. Everywhere, who is number one? That means, let me tell you, number one country in the world is America. That is superpower country in the world is America. America is a superpower country in the world. Okay, so we can say that on 4th of July, every 4th of July, my dear, Americans celebrate their independence. 4th of July every year they celebrate as their Independence Day. Okay, and who became the first president of America? Definitely, who led the army? Who was the commander-in-chief? So definitely George Washington was the commander-in-chief who later on became the first president of independent America. Okay. So now let us discuss about results of the war. Results of the war. So results of the war, my dear, what happened after the war? So definitely the American War of Independence not only brought freedom to the colonies, my dear, it even inspired the other countries of the world who were under the British rule. They were inspired to free themselves like the colonies freed themselves from the British rule. So result of American War of Independence, my dear. So American War of Independence ended the British rule. Okay. And due to the end of the British rule, okay, American colonies led to the emergence of United States of America. So end of British rule led to the emergence of United States of America. Then written constitution was framed. First time the written constitution was framed, constitution was written. Okay, and then this constitution declared America a federal democratic republic country. So what type of constitution was framed by them? A federal democratic republican government was set up. Federal democratic and republican government was set up. Okay, then this new government, the new government of America, my dear, guaranteed to all its citizens the right to freedom of speech, press, religion, justice under law. This was granted to each and every citizen of the American, each and every citizens of America, that is United States of America. Okay, the next one, the country would be ruled by the elected president, not by the chosen president, but by the elected president, who would govern according to the laws written down in the constitution. Okay, not according to his personal whims or fancies. So he will rule according to the constitution. Whatever written rules and laws are there in the constitution, he had to follow it, not by his own whims and fancies. Not that I want to do this or I want to do that. No, it's not like that. He cannot do anything which is beyond the constitution. He has to follow or rule the country according to the constitutional laws. Okay, and then in 1789, my dear, 1789, George Washington was unanimously elected as the first president of United States of America. United States of America. Okay, so 1783 Treaty of Paris was signed, which ended the British rule and the birth of United States of America. Okay, and in 1789, my dear, you can see here span of few years. In 1789, after the constitution was written, George Washington was unanimously elected as the first president of United States of America. Okay, and then we understand that the Constitution of America, so framed, my dear, okay, served as a model and the inspiration to several countries of the world. Even Indian Constitution is inspired from the American Constitution, my dear. The framers of our Constitution, the framers of the Indian Constitution, my dear, adopted various features like federal form of government, incorporation of fundamental rights, okay, and systems of checks and balance, okay, in our Constitution. So we have a fundamental right, and this fundamental right we borrowed from American Constitution, because in American Constitution they call this fundamental right as the Bill of Rights. So there it is known as Bill of Rights, so we call it as a fundamental rights. Okay, they have a federal form of government. Even we also decided to go for a federal form of government. Okay, and checks and balance. So checks and balance means both the legislature and executive are checked by each other. Legislature checks over the executive and executive checks over the legislature. So there is a balance between legislature and executive. Okay, but there is a separation of judiciary from both legislature and executive. So these are some of the good features we have borrowed from the American Constitution. So American Constitution is the United States is one of the biggest democratic country in the world. Okay, largest democracy we can say. So democracy started from America and it spread to different parts of the world. So the American War of Independence inspired many other countries of the world. Even India was inspired, let me tell you, my dear. India was inspired because when these things, when national movement was going on in our country, my dear, when English education was introduced in our country, many of the students, they came to know about American War of Independence and all, right? So when they understood about American War of Independence, the motive behind the war, then they realized that if the American colonies, 13 colonies, if they could free themselves from the British government, why not we? So that was an inspiration for the Indian freedom strugglers. Okay, so the American War of Independence inspired not only India, my dear. That time many countries were there which were under the control of the British. The British Empire was so vast, my dear. India was their colony. In Africa, many other countries were there under the control of the British. So they all were inspired with the American War of Independence. Okay, American War of Independence. So this is all about from this chapter. Okay, so American War of Independence, a great inspiration for the world at large. Okay, so thank you for watching this video. Please do watch the previous video also if you have not watched it. Okay, so we'll meet again in next class. Till then, take care, stay safe, bye bye.